That's the formula for disaster. And that's really where we see the bedsores, the falls, the elopements, the resident on resident assaults. And it's because there's not enough staff there.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Elder Care Insights by Welcome Back Home Care. We have a very special guest, Michael Brevda, who is the founder of Senior Justice, which is a law firm that is dedicated to protecting your loved ones in case of abuse or neglect. Heaven forbid that happens. So welcome, Michael Brevda.
Thank you, Lee. Appreciate you having me.
Great. So we appreciate you being here. So let's tell the audience a little bit. We're from the same town. We grew up together, same school district. After the high school, you went off. Where did you go to college?
So I was lucky enough to go to the University of Florida during the time that they won all those championships. So I went to the University of Florida for undergrad, and I stuck around and got my law degree at the University of Florida School of Law.
Very impressive. And so after that tenure was up at law school, you came down to Florida, South Florida, where you grew up. And what happened next? Did you start this law firm? Did you get some experience?
No. And for everyone listening out there that is either grappling with a potential elder abuse issue or maybe a family's kind of at a crossroads in terms of choosing a facility or keeping their elderly loved one at home. For everyone out there that's going through that, I wish that I could sit here and say with a straight face that, I went to law school with the intention of doing this because I know it's such a good fight and I wanted to avenge and stop elder abuse across the country. That would be untrue. I knew nothing about this subspecialty. In full candor, I went to law school I wanted to do land use and zoning, which I realize isn't very exciting, but that's what I wanted to do. As you know, 2008, there was the Great Recession. Nothing was being built. There was no land being used. There was no zoning going on. So all of these job opportunities that I had lined up completely fell through. So I was at a professional crossroads. I'm graduating law school. My one avenue that I was going down completely fizzled, and I was scared. I had no idea what to do. So I went on a job posting website through the University of Florida Law School, and I found the first job I could apply for, which was in Tampa, and it was doing, of all things, nursing home abuse defense. And I had no interest in it. I honestly had no idea what I was getting into, but it was a job in the midst of a recession. And I had it, I got it, and I was lucky to have gotten it because a lot of my schoolmates weren't able to get it because of the recession. So I went to Tampa, I did it. I had no preconceived notions going in. I just knew that we were defending nursing homes. It was a big firm and we were defending nursing homes. Within, 2 to 3 weeks of that job, I knew what I wanted to do. And I knew I wanted to do the opposite of the side that I was on. Because what would happen is we would get a case when I worked at the defense firm, and it would be awful facts. It would be abhorrent what happened to this vulnerable elderly person, whether it was a terrible bed sore or preventable falls resulting in fractures, or we saw horrible stuff. Elopement where they escaped from the facility. Terrible stuff. We would sit around, and as a young lawyer, you sit there and you listen more than you talk, and you're absorbing what some of the partners are saying. And there was never a defense. There was never an excuse, or there was never a reasoning behind it. The only real defense was, well, they were old. They were sick. And that struck me as complete BS, because everyone is sick. Everyone is old. That's why these facilities exist. They exist to house our most vulnerable patient population in our society. So saying, yeah, we may have dropped the ball here, but your mom was elderly, or your mom had dementia, or your mom had, end-stage Alzheimer's. That is not an excuse. That's a known risk factor. You knew that about her when she was coming into your facility. So, life kind of happens to you, and sometimes things happen for a reason. I don't know if it was, fate or whatever, but I took this job because it was a job. I had no interest in nursing home litigation, either plaintiff or defense. Within 2 to 3 weeks, I knew what my professional purpose was, and it was going to be to hold nursing homes accountable when they neglect or abuse vulnerable residents. Now that practice has since expanded, and whatever. I'll skip over my biography, but I ended up working at a really good plaintiffs firm.
You're, I got a lot of questions for you just off of that. That is
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
You started off kind of, say, on the dark side, whatever you want to say, but you really weren't feeling it. It wasn't in alignment with your core values and your personal culture. You obviously felt that, your soul belonged somewhere else. This wasn't meant for you. So now, a couple weeks after, you kind of cut your teeth with that case. You got a little bit of experience learning how to defend those communities, or, we call them communities because we have to be, nice to all the people I go marketing with, and they're not called facilities because that just, sounds like a stigma right there. So these facilities or communities, you were kind of defending them, and they were saying, look, it's not my, employees' staff fault because, your mom, she got up, she should have called, the caregiver or someone on staff. Like, why would she get up in the middle of the night? And then, you're obviously saying because she may have dementia and she may not know what she's doing and she's elderly and, she just had to.
And that's the reason why she's in your facility, because we know she's elderly and a fall risk and confused.
So, it's not really a great defense, but there's also a lot of, I'm sure, barriers to get around because, the cameras are turned off or there's no witness that actually saw this happen or, so it's kind of got to, but you see the evidence right there, which is that poor client or that poor victim that, has all these bed sores. Like they didn't just get thrown on them over, it's because there's rules when people are in bed and they're at total care that must be followed. People need to be turned. People need to be made sure that there's no hygiene issues with an adult diaper. That they've been, creating irritation, redness, and then what happens next, it's very, very bad, very, very dangerous. So I like where you got your experience to get on this, bus and got the job. And then there's probably some, spark that happened. I'd rather defend these great people, who have been victimized instead of defending this great big conglomerate. Let's gotta fight for the will of the people here,
Yeah. So I can briefly get into that because, like I said, within weeks I knew I was playing for the wrong team. I knew that it's not even so much that the defense firms, like the lawyers, are doing a bad job. They're doing a great job, and they're absolutely, the nursing homes and the assisted living facilities and the home health companies, they're entitled to have good lawyers, and they do have good lawyers. My main beef was that there was never enough workers in these buildings. And it was an intentional thing where everyone knows it. They're understaffed, and they're understaffed by design. And the reason being is that if you're able to get the balance sheet for any nursing home or any assisted living facility in America, you'll see the number one line item on the budget, the most expensive thing for these facilities is staff, hands down. So they could spend tens of thousands of dollars on beautiful crystal chandeliers in the lobby and marble floors and granite countertops. And you walk into these places when you're on your marketing tour and you think, holy cow, I would live here. This place is beautiful. This looks like a 5-star hotel. What you don't see is that there's 2 nurses to watch for the entire dementia ward during the graveyard shift, the night shift. And that's when terrible, terrible accidents happen. So that became readily apparent to me almost immediately. I knew I wanted to flip sides, to work for the injured families, the plaintiffs. And like I was alluding to before, I was lucky enough to have cases against really good plaintiff lawyers. And I I think I had a case against John Dominic, who was my mentor, and he was the one that eventually brought me in and hired me and taught me everything about how to try a case and work these cases up. And he's one of the best lawyers, I think, doing this in the country. I think I followed him to the parking lot. I think I chased him down after a deposition, and I said, listen, I don't care what you pay me. I don't care how many hours I work. You have to let me work at your firm, because I can't do this anymore. I cannot defend these places. So it worked out, and I worked with Sean in his firm in Harry Shevin for years. I ended up making partner there, and I was kind of like the nursing home guy. I did all the nursing home and assisted living facility cases there. And then, it just worked out that my wife was pregnant. I was commuting pretty far both ways. And I sat down, with my partners and said, look, I have to, basically open up my own firm now. I'm at a point in my career where I have to do this. And I did it amicably and I left on great terms. And I love all those guys now. And that was the beginning of Senior Justice Law Firm. And that happened in 2017.
Amazing. Amazing. So a lot of experience with that great law firm. You said, you know what, it's time. I have this great niche, which I believe it's a great niche. You're really, my hat's off to you because you're advocating for these victims and their families, and there's not enough people that are doing it. So, please, for all of everybody who's watching out there, where can we get in touch with Michael Brevda? What's the website, and where are you located? How many states are you in right now?
So we started out, like I said, in 2017. We were, a very small operation. We had a tiny office here in Boca Raton. And since then, we've been lucky enough to, I think through, like you said, fighting a good fight, advocating for deserving and vulnerable families, and kind of letting that positivity and that good client first culture emanate. We've been able to attract really, really, really top-notch attorneys across the country to come join us. So to answer your questions in order, if I'm remembering it correctly, you can always find us at seniorjustice.com. You can also call us toll-free nationwide at 888-375-9998. We have offices across the country. So we've grown into one of the biggest, if not the biggest, nursing home focused law firms in the country. We're here in Florida. We have multiple offices in Florida, DC, Virginia, Maryland, New York, Pennsylvania, both Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, so both sides of Pennsylvania, Chicago, Illinois, and we just opened up some offices in California as well, and the Bay Area and Los Angeles. There you go. We're starting to get kind of a groundswell of cases in New Mexico, and we just opened up Salt Lake City to kind of give us a window to that Pacific Northwest area, which we intend to open up in Washington and Oregon in the coming years. But our mantra, our mission statement is we have to bring the fight to these companies no matter where they hurt and harm our vulnerable seniors. So because these companies and these owners are national in scope and in reach, we have to match that. We have to have the same firepower. So the people that own and run these facilities, they're in Florida, they're in Georgia, they're in New York, they're in Pennsylvania, they're across the country. We should be too. That's the idea behind it.
Yeah. Wow. What a great vision. What a great mission. So I believe so too. And you're growing in kind of like gangbusters here. And that's a great thing. It's also a not so good thing because we understand that this is pretty prevalent going on around the nation. What do you think that needs to change aside from the staffing issues that you alluded to kind of change this trend? What should change? Do you believe in sort of regulations here, governmental regulations in Florida? I know every kind of state is different on their laws. Is there one universal thing that you can say, hey, this is what you should do if you're a community, please? Like, we don't want to have to fight you.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's a very long answer, but to make it incredibly short, staffing. So staffing and more regulation. We know, and this isn't me wearing my plaintiff lawyer's hat, everyone in the industry would admit that the owners of these facilities, the real top tier people, they're finance people, they're not clinicians. A lot of times we have this misconception of a nursing home boardroom being made up of, doctors and white lab coats and nurses that are, patient outcomes first. That could not be further from the truth. The people that make the decisions on the staffing and budgeting, the stuff that really matters, they're finance people. They're Wall Street people. They own REITs and they own investment banking firms. And they are dollars and cents type of people. And what that means is they don't care about Mrs. Jones' bedsore or Mrs. Smith's fall. They're just looking at a balance sheet. They're just looking at numbers. What needs to happen is there needs to be better staffing. We know if left to their own devices, these owners won't voluntarily do it. They're not gonna do it under their own volition to just say, you know what, it's the right thing. Let's go ahead and beef up staff numbers for aides and LPNs and RNs. They won't do it. So there needs to be universal staffing mandates. The Biden administration's trying to work on that right now on a federal level. Because remember, most of these facilities live off of Medicare and Medicaid dollars. So a lot of that is federal taxpayer dollars. But some of that also comes from the state because the state administers Medicaid programs. So each state has their own rules and regulations. They're wildly different. And, some are better than others. But ultimately, what we found is the better staffing requirements, the less negative outcomes you have. And I could tell you that that's what the data shows if you read the studies. I can tell you anecdotally, as somebody that's really just done this type of work for 15 years, I could tell you that at my law firm, we sue the same facilities over and over again. So it's not that bad things are going to happen at every facility and, it's easy to Monday morning quarterback. It's not that at all. We see the same repeat offenders over and over and over again. And you know who we don't see on the frequency that we see some of these bad actors? We don't see the true nonprofits. We don't see the facilities that are run by the Catholic Church or synagogue or a Presbyterian church. I'm not favoring religion or any specific religion. All I'm saying is that if a facility takes the revenue that they get from the government to care for residents and they reinvest that revenue into staffing, bad stuff doesn't happen. We don't sue them nearly on the level of the facilities that take the revenue from the government, siphon it out to shareholders, and hire as little staff as possible. That's the formula for disaster. And that's really where we see the bedsores, the falls, the elopements, the resident assaults. And it's because there's not enough staff there. So I think to answer your question, I think we definitely need more staffing, but I don't think that the industry will do it on its own. I think we need stronger regulation from the government.
Yeah. I've noticed that in the home care piece of it also, that private equity is getting involved in taking ownership of a lot of these companies. So if it's all about the dollars and cents and less about the customer experience, the organizational relationships, just the exceptional caregivers that we're trying to find, you get into that Walmart and the local hardware metaphor. We're the local we're hoping that there's more companies that are more like the local mom and pop shop that don't mind investing the extra percentage of the revenues coming in to support the staff, to support in-house, to support the caregivers. And they get, because if the caregivers are, or the patient care advocates, the people in the facilities, they're happier, they're going to do a better job too.
Absolutely. And to your point, the home health agencies, which, I know that you own one and I have a number of friends that run specific agencies. That's been the push for the past 10 years, is to age in place, to keep your parent at home as long as humanly possible. Because look at your staffing ratio. You have 1-to-1 care. You have one staff for one resident, or one, it's not really a resident, one patient, one client, whatever you want to call them. We rarely see the kind of outcomes that we see in nursing homes and assisted living facilities when we're looking at a home health, client relationship. So to your point, home health and staying at home with a caregiver is always, always, always going to be better than going into a facility. The problem is the cost. And oftentimes people can't afford to have that 1-to-1, which I totally understand. And that's not, it's not a criticism of the adult children. Sometimes the facilities, there's no other alternative. So definitely home health is paramount, but it's not always an option for families.
Yeah. And we do have clients that request to the families, and, they have to be somewhat affluent or have an insurance policy, and they have 24-hour care even at these communities or facilities, so they know. And we kind of tell folks that are thinking about moving in, We always do what's best for the families, but we'll let them know, like, you're going to have care there 24 hours, but it's not going to be one-on-one care. You're not going to be able to have that same type of experience as you would with a private caregiver or a caregiver that you hire through an agency or nurse registry. So it's very difficult. You can ring the bell and you need to go to the bathroom, and a lot of times on the graveyard shift or the weekend shift, you won't find anybody there. Give it 20 or 30 minutes, you might not find anybody there. So it's very difficult. Do you find more that you get less calls on these smaller bed facilities, 6 to 8 beds, or is that just as prevalent?
Yeah, I would say it's less prevalent, but we definitely get calls on the smaller, what you would call like a mom and pop facility. So what I would say in terms of like demographic shifts on the kind of calls that we're getting is when I was doing this, 12, 13, 14 years ago, it was my caseload was probably 90% nursing home, 10% ALF. If I was looking at facility cases, that's not counting medical malpractice or hospital cases and things like that. That ratio has now shifted to almost 50-50, where we're seeing one nursing home case to every one assisted living facility or memory care case. And I think the reason behind that is I think these memory care units or assisted living facility units, whatever you want to call them, I think they've gotten more aggressive in keeping residents that they probably shouldn't keep. And I think that they have very clever marketing salespeople that are lobbying the families. Hey, you don't want to move mom out of her apartment. Just keep her here. We'll put her in our memory care unit, or, oh, we have a special dementia wing that's made for residents with dementia. It sounds good to the family. They're like, yeah, great. I don't want to put her in a nursing home. Because I think they realize that there's a stigma about putting your parent in a nursing home, and they prey on that. And they really, unfortunately, I think they take an adult child that's feeling guilty or conflicted, and even though mom may need a nursing home, if the ALF person's like, no, we got it, don't worry, we can keep her here, it kind of plays into that psychological, opposition to putting somebody in a nursing home. What we're seeing is that these people need to be in a nursing home. Their dementia or Alzheimer's or underlying comorbidities, they've advanced so far, an ALF can't handle it. Whether you call it a dementia ALF or an Alzheimer's wing or whatever you want to call it, it's still an ALF. Their staffing requirements are here relative to a skilled nursing facility, which is up here. So we're seeing a lot of ALFs keep folks that they shouldn't be keeping, and then terrible things happen. And then the irony is when we come on board and we send our letters and we're essentially saying, look, we intend to sue you for assisted living facility negligence. The irony in all this is that the same facility that sold the family and promised the family that they could keep this person safe and said, oh, we have a special dementia wing that could watch them. That same facility flips the script and says, whoa, we're just an assisted living facility. Sounds like you wanted nursing home care. So we're seeing a lot of that. And I think that that's happening right now as we see these ALFs become more corporate.
Yeah. And so for myself, for layman's out there listening, there's a lot of different, say, acronyms, and there's a CCRC, which is a continuing care retirement community. We had a special guest on last month to explain about what that is. And they kind of do a little bit of everything. Tell me a little bit, what's the difference between the nursing home and the assisted living facility?
Yeah.
What do you mean? Yeah.
Yeah. So a nursing home is synonymous with skilled nursing facility. It's the same thing. That's the highest level of care. They call it a 24-hour nursing facility, meaning the highest acuity patients, the sickest, the most confused, the most prone to injury, the highest acuity patients have to be in a skilled nursing facility.
Yeah.
Their staffing requirements are high relative to an assisted living facility, which an ALF, it used to be that an ALF was, essentially an apartment, and it was a place where, we're going to give mom 3 meals a day, and hey, we can help out with her medication. If she gets 3 pills, one before breakfast, one after lunch, one after dinner, we've got that. We can help make sure that she gets her meds. And that was kind of it. So there was a big difference between assisted living and skilled nursing. What's happened, I think, is that these assisted living facility conglomerates have realized, hey, we're leaving money on the table here. We could keep these folks, we could keep a head in every bed, as the industry has been notorious for saying. We could keep a head in every bed. If they have good insurance, keep them. So they employ these really, really effective marketing people that are nice as can be, and they have all the right answers, and they tell you exactly what you want to hear. And they've created this whole like memory care or dementia wing sales pitch. And they say, oh, your mom has dementia. She doesn't need to be in a nursing home. Don't worry. We have this memory care unit. And these folks specialize in memory care residents, which are, Alzheimer's, dementia. So you walk away from that thinking, oh, great. She doesn't have to leave, Happy Hills Assisted Living. The reality is Happy Hills Assisted Living has a much less strenuous regulatory requirement when compared to Happy Hills Nursing Home. So they're keeping all the money, but they're not providing the same level of care as a nursing home.
Margins are big time difference in ALF scared as opposed to SNF.
Well, a lot of ALFs are private pay. So you have to remember that a lot of ALFs are taking private insurance money and private pay from the families. So they're not bound by those Medicare, Medicaid rates. So they can make a lot of money if they keep your parent in just for 2 more months. They can make a lot of money. And oftentimes when they stretch and they keep that person in there, even if it's just for a couple months, that's when that catastrophic fall happens, or that's when they're able to get out of the window and God forbid something terrible happens, or any terrible hypothetical here. If somebody's high acuity, they need eyes, and they need eyes on them. They need to be supervised. They need to be assisted with all activities of daily living, walking, toileting, bathing. They should be in a nursing home. There's just no way around it. I understand the hesitancy to do that. I understand that, maybe 20 years ago, your mom or dad would joke, you're never going to put me in a home, right? All levity aside, that's what those facilities are. That's the only place they can be kept safe. They cannot get that level of care at an assisted living facility, even if it has some snazzy name like memory care dementia wing. It's not a nursing home. They can't provide the same level of care, staff, and supervision as a nursing home.
Yeah, no one wants to feel the guilt of, putting their mother in a place where you have potential, like the character Ben Stiller, the janitor from Happy Gilmore.
Yes, yeah.
I remember that movie by Adam Sandler. This janitor was just so scary and like the nicest guy to the son or the daughter, but like to the clients, he is basically putting them to work, just being very mean, telling them when to go to bed instead of saying, hey, when would you like to go to bed? It's like, sit down, go to bed. I mean, that's one of, I'm sure, all of these adult children's biggest fears. So that's a little bit of an embellishment. It's a movie, but we get the idea. We don't want to be any risk for our loved ones. No way. Like, we want them to get the care they deserve in their golden years, and anything I can do. So, as a son, it's going to be done. So there's lots of ways to prepare for this. We'll have another episode on long-term care insurance, how to plan, financially for these long-term care costs from the sandwich generation perspective. And we never really understood how expensive long-term care is. I mean, it's crazy, but it's something that we have to think about. So that's a little bit of a prevention, having that caregiver there, even during that graveyard shift or during the weekend shift. Call an agency, call a registry, maybe ask a couple of questions. More does not hurt. It's like, if you can invest a little bit, even, 6 hours at night, we can always accommodate whatever schedule we think is lacking in that facility for the staffing. It's okay to have an extra set of ears and eyes. I know there's like a culture thing with the current caregivers that are working there, But the communities should never mind if they have an extra set of, supervision or someone to help advocate and hold accountable. And that's what you're doing essentially after the fact. But we want to try to do this, before the fact, and just what will be the ears and eyes. You can communicate with the caregivers, and I do get worried about the staffing and the hospital readmissions and all the stuff that comes with it. So, this is a pretty amazing company that you've built, Michael. Congratulations. So all over the U.S. And so what is the thing that you see the most? Is it falls? Is it the bed sores? And how can we incorporate technology these days into preventing some of these things from happening?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I really do believe if these facilities would embrace some of the latest tech involved in long-term care, it would really reduce and mitigate a lot of these adverse outcomes that we see. So to answer your question, we see, I'd say our top two most frequently litigated injuries are bed sores, which are also called pressure ulcers or decubitus ulcers, and then patient falls. And both of those, in our experience, both of those stem from this same cancerous, toxic root of understaffing. So if somebody's post-op, they may be on medication, they may have dementia, they may have cognitive confusion, whatever. Either way, they are bedbound or wheelchair bound. They can't reposition themselves in a chair or in a bed. Preventing a bed sore is incredibly easy. All you have to do is go in and reposition the patient every 2 hours in bed. And that literally means taking them from laying on their back to moving them to their left shoulder. And then 2 hours later, you rotate them to their right shoulder. It is one of the most frustratingly easy things to prevent. When we see a really bad wound, like a stage 3 or a stage 4 or an unstageable pressure ulcer, there's no excuse. We don't have to be, a detective to figure out what happened. They left that person sitting oftentimes in their own waste for hours and sometimes days at a time. I believe in humanity, so I don't think that a nurse shows up to Happy Hills Nursing Home one day and says, I'm going to let everyone get a bed sore because I hate the world. I don't think they're ill-intentioned. I think if you have 30 residents that you're taking care of, and there's one of you, because the corporation that employs you consciously decided to understaff the facility, you've got 30 fires going on at once. Mrs. Jones is running down the hallway up out of her bed. Mr. Smith is attacking, Mr. Jones is in room B. You have to triage what you're going to do. You're going to put out the fires that present the highest risk in the short term. So you're going to go chase after that resident that's running down the hall. You're going to stop the fight between these two over here. But because you are shorthanded, because there are not enough staff there, you're not going to reposition Mrs. Smith in room 8. Even though she's quiet, she's tranquil, she hasn't been moved in a day. Her skin is literally breaking down on her backside and creating like a cavernous wound, which the reason why, aside from the disgustingness of this, the reason why it's such a big deal is because these pressure injuries present as like portals to the body, because there's normally skin to prevent infection and germs and disease. That's gone. So that bed sore is an open gateway of infection that becomes sepsis and can kill you. So bed sores are, in my opinion, always inexcusable. Similarly, falls. And I understand that, a lot of adult children have this misconception of, hey, mom's a faller. I hear that all the time. My mom would get up, she'd fall at home. I understand that, but that's why she's in a 24-hour facility. Every single resident, when they come into an assisted living or a skilled nursing facility, every single resident by law has to be graded based on fall risk. So even if you're Lee Berkowitz and you're coming in and you're totally fine, you're only there for a short-term rehab, they're assessing you for fall risk. And the reason they do that is because the government recognizes what a dangerous threat falls are in an elderly patient population. So when they grade them based on fall risk, if they are a fall risk, they have to implement preventative measures. So some of the technology that you asked about before that could really help prevent a fall is a bed alarm. A bed alarm costs like $20 on Amazon. You put a sensor underneath the bed. If the patient gets up because they're confused, because they don't listen to instructions to remain in bed, if they get up to try to use the bathroom or to try to change their clothes, it beeps at the nurse's station. Now, if you have a nurse there because you have enough staff, the nurse can intervene in a matter of seconds. He or she runs over, intercepts Mrs. Smith, says, "Mrs. Smith, you have to get back in bed, sweetheart." That's it. No fall, no broken hip, no surgery, no wrongful death. Now,
When it risk mitigation.
yeah, that's all it is. That's all it is. We can never correct the behaviors. The behaviors are a product of the dementia or Alzheimer's or cognitive decline. That's the constant in the scientific formula. The variable is how are we going to handle it? How are we going to mitigate risk and injury, which is what you just brought up. And the way that we do that is we have enough staff to watch them, and we have technology like bed alarms or bed rails, or you can put floor mats. They almost look like yoga mats. You can put floor mats next to the bed. Now that doesn't stop a fall, but if you roll out of bed and you hit a soft floor mat, you're not going to break your hip. You can lower the bed. Very, very simple things they're not expensive. They're not laborious to do. You just need human beings to work in the facility to do it. And oftentimes that's where the rubber meets the road, is there's no one there to do it.
Yeah, and all these things apply to people at home as well. Just a simple alarm, a baby monitor in case there's someone there, in the room. And I've seen some amazing things. Like, you can only imagine, these are just very simple things. You can imagine what's really going on with artificial intelligence and sensors. And, there's some real things that I've seen out there. And stay tuned, because we love to highlight all the newest and greatest technology to help keep people safe. But with artificial intelligence, they can tell, these computer systems can tell, when someone's going to fall. And even if they do fall, there's like guardrails in place, that something will pop up to help protect, a flotation device will pop up, or, something will be there for prevention. So, I think it's super important to just stay on the cusp of technology to see, how we can prevent these things from happening. I mean, you're such a good guy, Mike, and you hate to see these things, and because I believe in humanity, you believe in humanity, I'm always trying to help people. If I see something, you got to say so. If you see one sore, there's so many resources for our caregivers to call on. Or, if somebody, even an adult child, sees something, to call someone like, Welcome Back Home Care, like Senior Justice, and ask a few questions. I'm sure you're happy to take a consultation to see, hey, maybe this wasn't, gross negligence. Maybe this was just something that you should do to prevent it from next time, So we're offering resources we facilitate through Medicare, any sort of wound care. If you see an open wound or you see some redness, just call us. We'll get the nurse there through Medicare, through wound care. We'll make sure that is addressed, because if you see something, or if you see a safety hazard in the house where, you can do an easy assessment, and you see a throw rug, which it seems to be dangerous, or there's a hallway that is a little too narrow for the wheelchair, or even like the commodes where we can like easily transfer from a wheelchair to the toilet, put in a couple grab bars there, at least if we do this evaluations and assessments, safety assessments, have a nurse come out. We're trying to be proactive to prevent these things from ever happening. So just call Michael Brevda, call Welcome Back Home Care, call any of these providers that you think may be able to help. We're proud to be a resource for people. I'm sure, you refer out to a lot of different companies to help in case, when they call you, right, you got to kind of shuffle up the deck and say, hey, you got to change everything.
Mm-hmm.
These are the people I work with.
Yeah.
These are my recommendations.
Yeah. And you kind of touched on this, but I feel like I'd be remiss to not give people some avenues to go down to report even suspicion, because the really crummy thing about what I do is that if you're driving down I-95 and you get rear-ended, whether you're going to bring a lawsuit or whether you're going to hire a lawyer, that's obviously you and your family's decision. But you are acutely aware that you could bring a case. You're inundated with legal marketing about, have you been injured in a car accident kind of thing. And that, it's not what we do.
Make jingles about it.
Yeah, but
give us a,
but I think the troubling thing is that the official statistics from the CDC is that only 1 in 5 incidents of elder abuse ever sees the light of day, gets reported, or has some action taken about it. That means 4 out of 5 incidents go not only without punishment, but literally without anyone even reporting it or raising the issue. So I think a lot of times the families are kind of blissfully unaware of what's going on. And the reason why is not ignorance on the family's part. It's that the facility will oftentimes lie and conceal what really happened. So I think it's incumbent on the family to kind of, I don't want to say distrust the facility. I don't want to sound like I'm some conspiracy theory tin hat guy. But what I would say is don't check your common sense at the door. If your loved one has injuries or bruising or even has to go to the hospital and it's unexpected, ask questions. Don't accept the first answer as the truth. Make sure it makes sense. And the reason why I'm telling you that is that oftentimes when something bad happens in a nursing home or an assisted living facility, the facility staff will come together and basically go into damage control. And they'll try to spin a story. So it's really important that you talk to third-party providers, like maybe like the EMS, like the ambulance folks that showed up at the scene. What did they say? Because they're not a part of that crew. What did the doctor at the hospital or the nurse at the hospital tell you about your parent's injury? If you even have a suspicion of some sort of wrongdoing or preventable injury, you owe it not just to your parent, but to every single resident in that facility to at least report it. And I'm not talking about calling a lawyer. I'm talking about calling the state. And the reason being is that a lot of those victims in there don't have advocates. They don't have you. So it's really incumbent on you to look out not just for your parent, but everyone on that floor, everybody in that facility. So what you should do is if anything seems off or suspicious to you, you should Google your state and type in ombudsman, OMBUDSMAN. Every state by law has to have a long-term care watchdog ombudsman program. So if you're in New York, they have a wonderful one. If you're in Florida, they have an excellent one. California has a really, really proactive ombudsman program too. Every state has one. So call your ombudsman if you even have a sneaking suspicion that something happened. Let them look into it. You can do it anonymously. You don't have to expose your name or your parent or anything like that. And it's free of charge, obviously. And if they come back and they say, look, we checked it out, everything's fine, you go to sleep at night saying, all right, everything's fine. I trust that. If God forbid they uncover something, maybe they uncover some systemic problem where it turns out those 2 CNAs that they said were working the night shift, they were falsifying the employment records. You just saved so many victims, so many preventable injuries. So I really think because you're not always told the truth as to what's going on and what happened, if you even suspect something, do something about it. Either call the ombudsman or call a lawyer like our firm, because you owe it to yourself and those residents to investigate what happened.
No, you're right. This is they put the legislatures and government, the state, federal government put this in place because this is your basic rights as a adult child, as a caring son or daughter, that there's places to go, to call, to report abuse, to report neglect. Do this anonymous. Call your ombudsman. And I'm pretty sure that these places, these facilities and communities have this paperwork where they sign in the beginning and they keep that paperwork. And there's definitely abuse and neglect numbers. There's got to be, requirements of anything that you see. There's phone numbers that you can call. I know that we have to provide those abuse numbers, the complaint hotlines. They're anonymous. We give them the ACA information, the Agency for Healthcare Administration. So we have to do that. And we like to do that because, we're just putting it out there and we're doing the best we can. We want to be as honest as possible. We understand that mistakes happen. We want to learn from them. First of all, we want to prevent them from next time. We want to mitigate future risks, but we also have to understand, and I think it goes back to what we touched on before, the caregivers and these facility owners, the board, has such a huge responsibility. And we as an organization have such a huge responsibility. We're in control of protecting the aging population, being able to offer resources in case something does happen, and they have to say something. If you see something, there's such a huge responsibility to say something, to speak up, and just report it. It's like you said, it goes a long way. You're one positive change can change the whole world. You change up future generations. And so we appreciate, that was a really good piece of information there. So I know you're short on time. We're both short on time. You have lots of busy things to do with this great practice, and we're so proud of you. So before we go, please tell us your best day as a lawyer owning senior justice law firm. What's your best day ever?
The best day ever, focusing on the professional stuff, because this about me, Lee, but the best day ever is to, go home to Ashley and the kids and watch one play baseball and the other do gymnastics. That's the best day ever. But professionally, wearing the senior justice law firm hat, I think the best day ever is when we have clients that call us and they go through an awful chapter. And I mean awful. I mean like gut-wrenching, just being robbed of their parent or brother or sister or aunt or uncle or whomever, but it's oftentimes the parent, through a completely preventable, boneheaded injury at a facility. They've never brought a lawsuit in their life. They call the state. Nothing happens. They call the administrator at the facility, who promises them this, really detailed internal investigation. It goes nowhere. Nothing happened. They write negative Yelp reviews. They write to the corporate office. They demand an investigation from the state attorney general. None of it goes anywhere. Nothing happens. They call us not out of a desire to recoup some sort of monetary damage. The money is not even important to them. They call us because literally there's no other avenue of justice for them. So the best day ever is when we can actually deliver some sort of justice, some sort of compensation to that family who has been literally lied to and given the runaround, not just by the facility, but by corporate, by the administrator, even by the state investigators who sat on their hands and didn't do anything. When we can deliver some form of justice in the way of money damages, and they're crying, and they're hugging us, and they're thanking us for the work that we did, and the justice that we delivered in the memory of mom or dad, that's the best day ever. And I think it feels so good because they don't even care about the money. The money is just, an afterthought. What feels good is that when you have these for-profit nursing homes and assisted living facilities, all that they care about is the bottom line. All that they care about is the money. So unless you impact their bottom line, they don't care. They don't care about Yelp reviews. They don't care about nasty letters from the family. If you take $250,000 from them, you've got their attention. Now they're flying in corporate reps. Now they're making changes to the policies and procedures. Now they're saying, hey, you know what? We could have had an aide here for $52,000 a year. It's a lot cheaper than paying the Smith family $250,000 a year. Let's put an aide on the night shift. That's how you impact change. That is the best day for me as the managing partner in senior justice law firm. And I can tell you, I know it sounds cheesy, but I've had many of those best days where it's incredible. We'll bring a case in 2019 over, a door that doesn't lock at the memory care unit, even though it's supposed to be a locked door. We'll have this big case. We'll end up either getting a verdict or settling it or an arbitration award, whatever. We end up getting the policies and procedures on a completely different case involving that same facility in 2024. I'm looking through the policies and procedures and I see something about this locked door on the memory care unit. And I'm literally thinking that's the Smith case. Like that's us. We did that. We made that policy come in. Now they didn't put it in because they felt bad. They didn't put it in because Mrs. Smith's family wrote a nasty letter. They did it because they had to pay the Smith family $250,000. And they said, I don't want to pay this money again. Fix it. That's the best day, is when you see actual impact, actual change brought about by the cases that we file.
Wow. That's very moving. It really means a lot, Mike. Your heart's in the right place. I see the passion. Everybody sees the passion and the caring heart that you and your team have. So, you're in the right seat. I'm so glad that you're there for our constituents in South Florida and beyond, and you're growing so greatly. So just stay in touch and, keep us posted with all these new states that you're opening up at, because we want to be a resource for any of our family, friend members that are calling because they hear about Welcome Back and that we're resourceful. And, unfortunately something happened, and we hear the story a lot, where the story happened in New York, but, we're ready to move mom down to Florida. This really bad thing happened in New York. So we're happy to be a resource and to definitely help those families in need. So I appreciate that very moving story and appreciate all that you do. So thank you so much for being with us here on the Elder Care Insights podcast presented by Welcome Back Home Care. We ask all in the audience to please subscribe to the page. And Michael, thank you so much for your valuable time, your insights, and your expertise on this. We really look forward to having you back. I could definitely talk with you for another hour or two on some more insights on the care facilities and how we can help prevent any of these tragedies.
Listen, man, I appreciate you having me. I appreciate all that you do in bringing out this voice for the voiceless. And yeah, listen. And on a personal note, congrats on baby Blake Ivy. That's awesome, brother. That's awesome news.
Lee Berkowitz and Emily, his wife, has another wonderful baby that was just introduced to the world. So thank you very much, Michael. All the best to you, your practice, your family. God bless. And let's please stay in touch.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.